I'd like to call to order the Water, Waste and Environment Standing Committee to order. We are meeting here on Treaty 1 land, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples. It is also the homeland of the Red River Métis. We receive our water from Shoal Lake 40 in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Ross Eady. I'll be your chairperson for today, and with me I have my colleagues, Mr. Dobson from St. James and Ms. Rollins from Fort Rouge, East Fort Garry. Also with us today we have Mr. Tim Shanks, the Director of Water and Waste. And he has his team with him today for various reports. And we also have our most esteemed senior committee clerk, Ms. Dolsky, who, Councillor Dawson,
yes,
the meeting consent.
10 minutes of meeting held on June 15th, 2026 be taken as read and confirmed.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed. That is carried. I think we have delegations. Councillor Rollins.
Yes, could I?
Want to suspend the rules?
Could I suspend the rules to listen to delegations that may not have registered by the deadline? And I know that includes my city center colleague, Councillor Gilroy. I also, once we're done calling that question, there's a new business item that Councillor Dobson's interested in that I'm prepared to move to concerning the Rutland trunk. But so moved on hearing from delegations first.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed. That's carried. And what was the second one
The
again?
new business motion pertains to just if we could get a verbal update on the Rutland trunk. Councillor Dobson's interested in the hole they're digging.
Oh, right. From sewer for combined sewer overflow relief. Okay.
So Sue moved on new business
So you're moving that as new business, so we'll add that in at the end.
at the end. Yeah.
Thank you. All those in favor? Nobody's opposed. That is carried.
Could we also have a motion just to suspend the rules to hear item 7 on the agenda? Was it addendum report?
So moved.
So moved. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed. That is carried. That would be the motion from council.
Correct, the order of real motion.
Councillor Gilroy will be speaking to that. Okay. Do we have any other delegations besides?
We do, yes, we do have a number of delegations speaking to the addendum item actually today. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So Councillor Gilroy's up first.
Thank you, committee. First off, I won't take too long because I do know there's a lot of people registered for this item, and I'm sure some of them might even know a lot more than I know on this topic, so I will keep it brief. So I'm asking for us to do a cross jurisdiction. I can't say that word, I'm sorry, to review what other cities are doing on the protection of our waterways. And I think that even now it's more important as we're seeing so much rain and the climate change issues that we're having. And what better way of doing that is to look at what other cities are doing, to understand best practices that are out there and what maybe we could be doing further to protect those waterways and make sure that we protect the natural environment and habitat that goes along with that. So that is my request, and so I'm hoping that you'll support me on that. I don't think we've had this kind of study in a while, and I think it's really important that we understand what other cities are doing, because it is my understanding that the Winnipeg is behind on the protection of our waterways, and so I'd love to see us do more. So that starts with I'm looking at what other cities are doing.
Are you going to say any more? Okay. Just you sit on community services.
I do, yes.
I can't remember. Has there been a report on the biodiversity and looking at purchasing land?
No,
No,
No.
Yes.
that hasn't arrived yet. Okay.
No.
Okay. Questions?
Sherry, Councilor Rowland's shaking her head. I can't, if it was, I can't remember. It would have been a while back, so,
Okay,
but yeah.
questions?
Yes, I'll be in support of the motion. I do want to ask though, given that you're the author of the motion. On number 2, the feasibility of establishing a minimum 90-foot ecological setback.
Yeah.
When setbacks had come before us, we do have sometimes minimums that are not 90 feet. So that they could be larger. So I remember, doing this before and saying, I don't want to establish a minimum when 90 foot sometimes it could be, or 27 meters. Sometimes it could be a 40-foot minimum setback or a 90-foot setback from the waterway, depending on the stability. So I think there's good reason to not necessarily, like, I do believe we've received feedback before to not necessarily establish a hard minimum when, because the point, the rest of what follows is that you want it set back from the waterway, and you do concede, like, except where site-specific circumstance warrant alternative treatment. But that was the feedback we got when we said we'd establish the minimum, is that sometimes the minimum is actually 35, 40 meters, depending on the riverbank. So I'm not sure if you've changed your mind on that, but when it's come to us before, that's been sort of the feedback on establishing minimums. But I wanted to ask you a question on that.
Yeah, I think that we need, like, I think that my concern is more, what can we do when somebody's doing a rebuild, right? Like, we have those kind of minimums in terms of, the development, but what can we do if somebody is now going to make changes to their property, right? How can we protect that within those property rights? So yeah, I just think we should look across I can never say that word. Look at what other cities are kind of doing on that. And I'm open to having those discussions, but I'd like to kind of know what other cities are doing in terms of this.
And then in terms of what Councillor, the chair indicated in terms of what came through the biodiversity policy, we did, I was hoping to get it, and I'm still hoping that perhaps it'll be September or even July committee of council. But we know that the upcoming bylaw has within it several components, the biodiversity, green space, and more. And it was within the green space that we did talk about naturally significant purchases and redirecting money towards that. So we've talked about that as a council before. It hasn't come before us necessarily, other than an indication that we would put, I believe, 10% of land dedication reserve towards it as a collective. So would you be amenable to a small amendment linking it to that biodiversity policy when it comes? Because I think the jurisdictional scan would be really useful in shining a light what other practices are when the bulk of the work that we're expecting on the biodiversity plan, the ecosystem, the natural lands, potential purchasing of environmentally significant lands, and like other things that flow out of that policy comes forward.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think that, yeah.
Just to point to it.
Yeah, no, that's
significant.
I'm totally okay with that amendment. I think that that's great. And my concern was that how long it was taking, because right now I am seeing like them wanting to sell like city land all over the place. And yet we have this policy that will be coming forward that is trying to get us to buy more green space, which is ridiculous that we're getting rid of land at the same time that we're wanting to buy more green space. And so that is my big concern with this policy taking a lot longer. And I think it does make sense to tie some of this work together because it will, like, that does have an impact when we have, land that is adjacent to a park that we could be increasing the biodiversity within that park, right? And so, or even on our riverbanks, the ability to purchase land that maybe wasn't ours along our riverbanks to do a lot more protection around the habitat environments and protecting our waterways. So yeah, I support that, Councillor Owens. There's a lot of work that can be combined for sure.
Yeah, the ecologically significant land strategy was meant to flow out of the biodiversity policy, the green space, and more. Where I was expecting it to before. I was expecting it this term, so
Yeah.
it would be good to have that jurisdictional scan so that it comes before us. It's we are seeing the latest, and hopefully we exceed what others are doing on the basis of this good work that was all up on Engage Winnipeg and still is. Okay, that's my questions.
Questions, Councillor? Thoughts?
Nope, we're good.
Thank you.
So the biodiversity plan, it talks about purchasing contiguous land to extend like a biodiversity green space, X number of whatever, along riverbanks. I actually, so I live on Scotia, right? So in a flood zone, and many of the places along Red River and Assiniboine and others, they're in the flood zone. And I don't know if you know this, but in order to build until ever in those flood zones, there's a requirement, a calculation of weight load, whether or not it might destabilize a riverbank and so on. And often that formula means the building has to move further away from the riverbank. You're aware of that?
Well, yeah,
Those calculations along the rivers?
I'm aware of that, yeah. The one thing though that I'm also getting a little bit more knowledgeable on is one of the best ways that we can be preserving our riverbank is through naturalization of the riverbank, which we tend to overdevelop along our riverbank. So, and then also too is the when we are developing along the riverbanks, the protection of like when the development is occurring, to do a lot more protection of what's flowing into our riverbanks is kind of critical. So those are my understanding of some of the things that I think we're missing in our policy.
So your concept though is more related to like green fill or whatever, like for example, University of Manitoba has that whole little neighborhood where the golf course used to exist. So in there, you expect at least a minimum of 90 feet.
I think
Yeah, or more.
Yeah.
That's,
I'd like to see.
anyway, that's a lot more doable. That's a lot more doable in like greenfield development, right?
Yeah. But maybe we're
Can't see-
taking,
There's a lot of homes built along the riverbanks.
yeah, but we might be taking the opportunity now to say, okay, any property that we have along the riverbank, we're not gonna sell that. Like, we're gonna keep it as a public asset, and then we're gonna, create, greater protections around it. And then maybe land that's becoming available around riverbanks, like we're an old city, so we sold a lot of that land, unlike places like Edmonton that kept their riverfronts, right, which are now beautiful. People can walk far along the river, right, where everyone has access to it, but we tend to sell ours. We also have the ability of purchasing that stuff back once it comes available, which would be a huge cost, but you know, there are ways that we could be doing greater work around protection, so that's what I'm trying to find out, what other cities are doing in comparison, what we're doing here.
Yeah, so this concept also like access to riverbanks.
Yeah,
There are street right of ways that start at the riverbank. I was always interested in Public Works isn't treating it like green space and taking care of already somewhat biodiversity that's there. So you would expect these kind of things to pertain to those various city pieces along the riverbank are taken care of from that biodiversity perspective.
yeah,
Okay, so that would be part of what we're looking at.
And a lot of the work is there. We do have a really great discussion on the number of regulatory tools and more within the biodiversity docs that have come forward for engagement. So, you know, I think that the department has it because we do have a discussion on what Canadian tools are out there for land acquisition, protection and restoration. And I appreciate that, you know, the clause 2 pertains to the potential minimum setback, but that the bulk of the motion is about those tools and, you know, whether it's purchasing private lands, doing land exchanges for the protection of water, looking at natural asset management, like the whole kit and caboodle is your point. Okay.
So also riverbank stabilization, yeah, I naturalized or whatever that helps stabilize a riverbank, but we have a lot of green space along rivers in this city. Like there's even, again, I don't like the way Public Works deals with the right of ways to go to the river. There are a number of them in my ward that need to be stabilized. And there's also rights of way where we're not trimming we're not taking care of the trees properly and so on. So again, you're expecting that this would have to be looking at that as well. Because as far as I know, regarding the bylaw and that other stuff, it's not being pushed on for street right of ways. That you're never going to be, you're not building a street right to their river. So.
yeah. Well, what I really loved about Edmonton is that when they did have public access and they built up a little bit of that riverbank, but around it was all trees. And like, we know that trees are just so vital to holding that riverbank together. And of course, a lot of the public don't know that. So the first thing that they say, oh, the tree is in my sight line to the river and I want to cut them down. So, you know, there's a lot of work we can do at educating the public as well, and trying to preserve as much as we can in and around riverbanks to make sure that they are more stable and that they last longer, right? We help slow down the erosion process. And so, yeah, I got to see a little bit of that in Edmonton, that was nice to see.
Well, I'll point out, like St. John's Park, I'll point out, when I was a kid, there were trees on pieces of land and stuff. But when you get those big floods coming through, that's disappeared over the years now. Like we've lost at least 50 feet
Yeah.
of actual riverbank because it was unstable. And when those big washes come through, they cause the collapse, right? So hopefully in this plan, we'll look at I've never been happy with the amount of money we put into stabilizing riverbanks, even on our own property that we own. So anyway, So your vision here as well is to look at stabilizing riverbanks that the city owned that are required.
Yeah, like everything that we can do to protect our waterways.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Gilroy.
All right, so we have registered delegation.
Yes, so joining us over Zoom, we have Lloyd Johnson. And he's also speaking in support of the establishing policies for the protection of waterways, report 7.
Mr. Johnson.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, councillors. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. I'm here to discuss the waterway concerns that affect the northwest corner contained within the city and the RM and Rosser areas. These waterways that I'm addressing are the East Colony Creek, Churro Creek, Olmans Creek, and Sturgeon Creek catchment basins. These 4 creeks provide drainage for a vast region located within the northwest corner of the city that flows into the Assiniboine River before flowing northwards into the at-risk Lake Winnipeg. These 4 watershed areas constitute the bulk of the drainage systems in the northwest Winnipeg. Each system is a rich biodiverse environment. Marshland species thrive in these water areas. They provide homes for fish and other aquatic life, songbirds, and nesting grounds for waterfowl, as well as they are a source of water for our resident deer population and other mammals. Regarding the future rail relocation, I need to bring up an important point. The development will be located within the Olmans Creek catchment area. My concern is that there were a rail spillage similar to what has recently seen in the McPhillips underpass area. The spillage could have a devastating effect on these waterways. Those contaminants would leach directly into the creek that flows into the Assiniboine, which could enter Lake Winnipeg. What would be the environmental effects of such a disaster be, short-term and long-term? The other creeks, catchment basins in the area are also at risk from poor business practices such as illegal dumping or container spillage. There's an even more critical issue. These 4 waterways are already stretched to their limits by city waste and agricultural runoffs. Winter runoffs and this June's rainstorms this year have provided ample evidence that there need to be protected these waterway areas. The high water levels collected in these basins and prevented massive flooding of homes and businesses in the downstream area. Future developments need to respect these areas with appropriate setbacks. Cities in general have a propensity for filling up in drainage areas in favor of not respecting waterways, as evident in our Woodhaven area. These waterways still flow into Sturgeon Creek. The water still moves there as underground rivers with no respect for people's homes' basements. I lived on Woodlands Crescent, and we had an underground river flow behind our house through a neighbor's basement, then making its way to Sturgeon Creek. It would be interesting to overlay a map of these past creek developments and street deterioration. Water will still flow where it wants to go. We need to respect in our designs. Examine the historical inventory of waterways before development proceeds. All our waterways are precious for long-term environmental protection. They need to be protected as they serve not only to protect lives, but the environment and future generations. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks for your presentation. You had a question, Councillor Holmes?
Oh, no, I just wanted to thank him and.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And I'd also like to thank him. He brought us some good concerns for the new development north of Saskatchewan and for the creeks that will affect. So it's something that we should be looking at.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Hold on, Mr. Johnson.
Sorry.
I just want to clarify some things, but Councillor Dawson, you're referring to
The Sturgeon, Truro,
just west of the new Center Port itself. Is that where that neighborhood you're talking about?
Centerport.
You said Saskatchewan, right? So yeah, that's that neighborhood there. north of Saskatchewan and west of Sturgeon.
Sturgeon, yeah.
Yes. All right, Mr. Johnson, you referred to the arm of Rosser, and we've had this discussion before. Art, I'm not sure if you're saying you want us to try to apply city of Winnipeg jurisdiction rules and so on Rosser. You know, we're not allowed to do that, right?
No, but I want you to be aware of what could happen if there's environmental damage happening that would affect the city from Rosser.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Thank you for your presentation and have a great day.
And you as well. Have a wonderful day.
And next we have Dave Green, also speaking in support of report 7, and Mr. Green is also joining us over Zoom. Mr. Green, to unmute your microphone and start your video.
I have a PowerPoint presentation, so can you allow me to share it?
Good morning. We can now hear you. You can hear me.
Okay, just a second. Okay, I'll just share my.
You can go ahead with your presentation.
Do you see it on the
Yeah.
screen?
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. So yes, I am Dave Green. I'm a co-chair of Ours Winnipeg and a member of Trees Please Winnipeg. Perspective. I've often heard before that amenities such as professional sports teams, the Jets, the Bombers, the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra, the Royal Winnipeg Ballet, and having ample sports fields within our city are often considered to help entice business and people to move to the city. I would argue that adequate green spaces, parks, natural areas, a good tree canopy, and healthy waterways and corridors are just as important. They are beneficial because they give accessibility to citizens citywide. They add to the aesthetics and the livability conditions. Scientific studies have shown that these provide increased mental and physical well-being of people, and they do provide meaningful contributions to municipal infrastructure services, things like storm retention, carbon storage, climate change mitigation effects by reducing heat island effects and other attributes. The importance, the health and condition of our city waterways and adjacent river corridors is a reflection of the importance we put upon them. Properties adjacent to our waterways provide some of the best natural, biodiverse, and treed canopy areas within the city. Development pressures along waterways threaten to reduce and destroy these attributes. Our tree canopy needs further protection because it is also impacted by infestations such as emerald ash borer and the Dutch elm disease. Ecological protection and environmental stewardship along our waterways would also support the Green Space Natural Corridors Plans bylaw and biodiversity policy that the city is developing. Unfortunately, that policy is, as far as I know, is being delayed until next spring, and a lot of the development is occurring while that policy is still waiting to be looked at and approved. Waterways regulation update. We think we need to update the waterway regulation 5888/92 to be comprehensive by including an ecological review in conjunction with the engineering review. This regulation defines an area within a flood fringe zone requiring a permit from the city before any alterations to the landscape can be done. That's just the city clerk's website. Currently, this regulation only requires an engineering area review. For example, building design measures needed to reduce damage from flooding and to reduce temporary flood protection required to protect property during flooding events. And other considerations, we think you need to expand the development density reductions for higher density structures along waterways, as exampled in Schedule AC of the Development Requirements for Low Density Infill Zoning Bylaw 200/2006. The examples were restrictions clauses 3.1 and 3.2. That was for the 3-plex and 4-plexes where any river property along it couldn't have 3-plexes in R1 or 4-plexes and only 3-plexes in R2. Increased structure setbacks of 30 meter from top of bank for any new development adjacent to the Red, Assiniboine, Seine, and LaSalle rivers, and Sturgeon, Omens, Buns, and Truro creeks. And this would be consistent with the Complete Communities 2 Goal 9.4.1, where it says possible, maintain a setback of 30 meters from the normal high water mark of waterways and water bodies as determined by the Director of Property Planning and Development to help protect riparian areas. So it still does give you some leverage to make adjustments, as is in the, I think it was item 2 of the motion. Other issues, city-owned properties adjacent to waterways should not be sold or should be retained and not be sold. The real estate policy framework needs to be revised, whereas assessment of city-owned land being considered for surplus would actually target to retain properties adjacent to waterways and not be sold. And Parks Branch should not be required to pay full market value and be able to obtain city-owned land from the city real estate department much easier than it can do now. Other factors, the city had committed to an additional 1,000 acres of green space by 2045 in the planning documents adopted in 2022, and that's only 19 years from now. And potential green spaces, parkland, especially adjacent to waterways, need to be kept and acquired where possible before important ecological areas are gone, and as land prices continue to increase over time, and then it becomes beyond the reach of city to be able to purchase. Preservation of riverbanks, natural areas and parks and green spaces are key components of a sustainable Winnipeg. They do align with directions in our Winnipeg 2045 and the Strategic Opportunity 7 in the Winnipeg Climate Action Plan. And that's the end. Thank you, and I can try to answer any questions you might have.
Well, that was quick and quick. Definitive there. Okay, questions, comments?
Dave Green is a gift to the city, if not the world, and I'm grateful for his very thorough presentation. Some of the implications, though, means, well, we will need to discuss with Property and Development Committee with respects to some of the aspects he'd like to see reviewed and changed. Some are underway in that committee, but we're important that this is a whole government focus, and yeah, more work to do because Dave Green told us.
Yeah, no, and we understand that there has to be some communication between the departments, but that's what we're hoping happens, is that this is an impetus to get that kind of going. And as I think you were mentioning before, the green space plan and natural corridor plan bylaw and biodiversity policy, we were hoping that was going to be done by this summer, or at least by September. But as far as I know, it's being postponed until next spring. And then is it even going to be postponed further? And the problem we do have is a lot of our properties are getting eaten up. And some of the important properties are getting eaten up before that kind of policy or those bylaws are put into place. So that's kind of the scary part for us. So, and I think there's always kind of outs that even if we go for a 30-meter setback of building, basically it's a setback of building, so you're not building too close to the riverbank. Yeah. But there are going to be areas where that can't happen, and you have to do it on a case-by-case basis. We understand that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Green, did you just showed us a presentation? Is that right?
Yeah.
Have you submitted that, or?
Yes.
You have submitted that? Okay.
Yeah. I think, I can't remember if it was Carly. When I initially submitted it for some reason the link wasn't working, so I had to send it by email. So I think she got it a couple of days ago, I think.
All right. Thank you. Any questions, Councillor Thompson? No. Okay. Thank you for that thorough presentation, and hopefully we'll see things move forward in a more the climate change and what's happening out there.
Yeah.
So
thank you very much. Have a good day.
All right. Thank you.
Next, also speaking in support of Report 7 is James Bedome, and he's also joining us over Zoom.
Hello.
Right.
Good.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good morning, Council. Thank you for having me here this morning. I'm here, I'm Executive Director of the Manitoba Eco Network, here to speak in behalf of item number 7, establishing policies for the protection of waterways. Obviously, the Eco Network is supportive of efforts that we can take to create protected riparian areas in the city of Winnipeg. I think it's really important to realize that these serve as important natural wildlife habitat and corridors. That's obviously good for wildlife protection, but it's also good for interaction that we might have with people. If we don't protect these corridors, then we may see further wildlife disturbances, takes time on roads, city, public services, etc. Also, I think when you think about riparian areas, they're also important. So we're seeing London and Paris and Toronto facing extreme heat waves. If you have riparian areas where you have vegetation, you end up having shaded corridors, places where people can stay and cool and transport if they're choosing to travel by walking or active transportation, or maybe that might be their only option or choice in those circumstances. I think it's also worth noting that this is that the motion itself is a direction to get information and to report back on that information. So, really, I hope we'll see support for this, because it's not necessarily a commitment to do something, although certainly we want to see the city do something and do more. But it's really getting you information, which I think is key to help make better decisions. Just as I was listening this morning, I thought it just seems worth commenting on a couple of points. One would be, there was a discussion about how Edmonton has done a much better job, was developed a little bit later, so they have these corridors. And further to comments Mr. Green said, these are natural assets, right? Like river corridors and places for people to walk, they make our city desirable, they make it attractive, they make it a place for people that want to live. So obviously it may be more expensive, but it would be valuable to see how much private property is owned within 90 meters or directly on the river. What is the tax assessed value of that? We can figure out what it might actually cost, not to say that the city has the money or we would immediately, but acquire those properties, right? We can start the long-term planning. We may not have been fortunate enough to make those decisions when Winnipeg was developed, but we can start making the long-term planning to get there in the future. And back in April, I was at a webinar, and this is a study done by the City of Toronto, valuation of ecosystem services in Toronto's parks, golf courses, and open green spaces. And basically just the monetized value, climate change, water protection for Toronto was over $7.7 billion. So these assets have values, and I think it's important that we see them as that. And I think that's what this motion's trying to do. I also just wanted to comment, there was discussion, I think, with Councillor Rollins about, I think the concern was there's some people that have built, may have a building that's within 90 feet of the river. But if you look at it, it says development and redevelopment projects. So you'd be looking primarily at new developments. And then in redevelopments, I would suggest you'd probably have some sort of separate process, and you might have situations where you'd have something what you might refer to as grandfathered, in the sense that, yes, okay, this building was built and it's already built within 90 foot. But then even then, I think you're going to want to consider certain ecological considerations of building it. And I think it was Councillor Eady who was highlighting, yes, there's engineering studies about the stability of coastal waterways, but we want to look beyond just the stability. We also want to look at the ecological integrity and the impacts that might happen in terms of creating these aspects. So, all in all, I think, this is an important first step. It's important that it coordinates with other departments and other efforts of the city, but I think it makes, there seems very little harm in getting the information so that we can come back to this, you can look at this, and we can have the full information to make the best decisions and the strongest decisions towards the strongest ecological protections possible. That's all I want to say this morning. Thank you very much. Subject to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Bedum. Councillor?
I want to make sure that it's clear, though, and on the record, that you're aware that this wouldn't be a first step. I think there has been very significant work that council has already taken, including ecological significant lands that we already have protection for and definitions that are robust. So this isn't a first step. It is, what it is, a jurisdictional scan. It's at a good time and place, but I don't want to leave anyone with an impression that the city of Winnipeg doesn't have very specific sensitive land or natural area contours right now, that we've got. We acknowledge our natural ecology of our region. We've got committees, including international committees, that work on the natural ecology of the region in concert. That lands, birds, communities, more cultural and historical significant lands, riparian riverbank areas, all of all of that, we do have definitions for to maintain existing ecological health we can improve. But I don't want anyone to think that we haven't done really significant work here that can rival Toronto or Edmonton. We have the Red River Basin, we've done very significant work across the prairies. So I want to make sure that everyone knows we're building off of that, and I know, James, that you've participated in a lot of that as Manitoba Eco Network, but I think that this motion, you know, obviously will pass with maybe a few amendments. There's work to do, but it isn't. I would disagree that it was a first step, and I'm interested in knowing more on why you think it's a first step. Why you've characterized it that way.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the question, Councillor Rollins. Yes, I definitely want to appreciate it's not as if Winnipeg doesn't have environmental policies or environmental protections in place. Wasn't trying to suggest that it wasn't. What I was trying to suggest is that this is, I think as you highlighted, it was a jurisdictional analysis that was going to look at that, and that was expressly looking at, like, the one I think most particular policy recommendation is the feasibility of establishing a 90-foot ecological setback minimum for new development and redevelopment. So it's just to say it's not necessarily making that decision itself, but it's getting the information to determine the feasibility of that, and also appreciate. Yes, it has to connect with the work being done at property and development, and you know, it's important that aspect is done there. So that was what my comments were, and I think my comment is, it's not to say that Winnipeg, you know, doesn't have some policies where maybe it can be leading other cities, but you know, we can be looking at other cities. I don't know if Winnipeg's done a comparative analysis that like Toronto's done on the valuation of our ecological assets. That was a relatively new study from 2023. I don't believe we have something quite one-to-one comparative. And also just sort of like to sort of add the clarity on that. And also I think there's a general feeling that yes, the Eco Networks participated in a number of environmental groups, and as I understand, Councillor Gilroy met with environmental groups in developing this motion and bringing it forward. But also, I think there's a general sentiment that we need to go further. We need to move forward more quickly on these issues. That we're not meeting the moment, and that we're seeing the impacts. We're seeing tornadoes in the city of Winnipeg. We're seeing, you know, worsening weather conditions that make it more challenging. So that makes these actions more urgent. So maybe first step could have been phrased better, so I will acknowledge that, but it's to highlight that this is getting a jurisdictional scan and is investigating the feasibility of an option, but not necessarily deciding to take that option. And the last part of that was just there were some comments on things being expensive, and I think, you know, that's fair, but I guess my pushback on that would be, you know, when Winnipeg built Assiniboine Park, somewhere where, you know, leading in the world urban park, it was considered too expensive. I don't think a single person would say that today, because we can see the value of what that did. So even though sometimes these things are expensive, they're very worth it. They deliver a lot of value, both in terms of the assets, ecological protection, in improvement of people's lives, in protection of wildlife. So that's where, you know, we want to see these investments made.
Yeah, just on that, the current regulated area with respect to either rivers, or even if you looked at Bowman's Creek, is more than what is suggested in this motion. So that's why I've lent comments that, you know, currently the motion is much less than the regulated area that we require on riverbanks or even creeks. So that's why, you know, I'm really interrogating what is meant here. We do 107 meters, we do 350 feet, we do, you know, we are in many ways, the regulated area off river and creeks is much more comprehensive than the motion would suggest. So, you know, I think that part is important to know whenever you're a council on the precipice of a motion, to really say, okay, it sounds like, you know, it's a thing, but then you go into the actual policy and our policy is actually more protective than this motion would suggest following, you know, depending on how it's worded. So, you know, important to not backtrack too, I think you would say, yes?
Well, I very much appreciate that, and yeah, I don't think the intent of this is to backtrack, and you make good points that in many cases we might be pushing further out, but that's where I would say, like, a study of the feasibility may exactly bear that. The Public Works has looked into this, and the report of the Public Works is the reality of existing policies actually already protect beyond 90 feet, and what the real challenge or issue is, or where we're seeing issues of development along the riverbank in Winnipeg, examples of problem case studies or whatever the case may be, is this. So, like, that's where I would try to say that when you're looking at the feasibility of it, it may bear out precisely what you're saying, Councillor Rollins, that actually when you look at existing policies, there already is a protection of 90 feet. And what really needs to be done is we need to start purchasing river properties as fast as we possibly can. I mean, all of this is hypothetical, so I don't want to say that that is necessarily the answer of what should be. They're meant to be illustrative, but that's where I'm saying that feasibility study becomes beneficial. It provides that information and something for you as a counselor to even refer back to say, actually, we looked at this. This is what Public Works found. Here's the report, etc. Does that help address your questions?
Yeah,
Like your comments a little bit?
yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. You didn't have any questions, did you?
No, I didn't. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation and enjoy the rest of your day.
So we also had Diane Bousquet registered via Zoom. However, she's not in the Zoom meeting with us currently. And we also had a Katharina Steifenhofer, who was registered in person, but Katharina is not here either. So we can move on to the next delegate, Patrick Nealon, who's joining us in person today, to be heard in opposition to Report 7.
Okay. Hello, sir.
Hello,
Hi.
how's it going? Super appreciate to be
Always
here.
here.
Speak upon this. I know it's lots of technicals, but no one talks about ceremony. A lot of the trees have the medicines we use for our ceremonies. We also sing to the water. That's the other thing that no one really talks about. Water is medicine. Water is life. And if we poison the water, we poison ourselves. Another thing no one looks at is that we're all supposed to eventually dance around the tree of life. That tree of life brings everyone together. And a lot of times, like the Limay Forest, we saw destruction of the forest. And we're seeing that all over Turtle Island, from here to there. For instance, in BC, there's a copper mine that's going to leave a big hole, destroy the salmon. We don't want that here. So it's really good that we're establishing these protocols and protections in our waterways and our trees. And we should also take consideration of ceremony, because the peoples here know how to take care of the land. They've been doing it for centuries, and we should be consulting them as well. And that's what I got for you. I appreciate everybody here. Shimagwich.
So you were recorded in opposition because we didn't acknowledge the need to consult with First Nations.
Well, I'm saying there's things that we can discuss together and work together, protect the water, protect the land together. Just like Kathy Merrick said, coexist, work together, build together.
Okay, that's great. Councillor Rollins or Dodson?
Thank you for coming. The Green Space Plan and Biodiversity Policy has provided forums, consultation, and incorporated First Nation, Métis, Inuit, who I'm seeing into the plan, and we expect to come forward as directed by council. And the direction did specifically mention exactly what you're discussing here today. And so I would encourage you to come back, and if you leave your contact information, I can provide you some of the work and engagement that has been done in creating the plan, in incorporating ways of living, being, doing, and seeing, which includes ceremony.
Exactly.
So If you're interested in that, I sure would be interested in you reviewing the work that the department did with Indigenous Knowledge Keepers. With creating the bridge on Indigenous, non-Indigenous perspectives in the biodiversity policy and green space plan, and then what comes out of it. That part I think would be important. We had a co-development team with the biodiversity policy of Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, Manitoba, Keweenaw, Towie, Okanagan, MKO, MMF, Southern Chiefs, Treaty One Nation, Inuit Resource Center, and that was also sponsored by Collaborative Leadership Institute. And so I would be really interested in you looking at that and letting us know what you think, given your priorities today.
City, in non-public meetings, there has been a lot of dialogue with First Nations on many of the initiatives that we're taking, so. And Councillor Rollins is very informed about it, so. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
And that concludes our delegations, Mr. Chair.
That's it, and nobody has appeared in the Zoom, Deanna? or-
Correct, no, we do not see Diane in the Zoom meeting.
And- All right, so we can then move on to reports. Report number one.
Yes, report number one, financial incentives for composting 2026.
Yes, okay.
Yep.
Mr. Shanks, yeah.
Yeah, this is our annual support program. It's not sure if I can call it a grant still, but it's like a grant. We take applications and this program is to be in place until the city has curbside organics. That was one of the directions from council. So we provide it's up to $65,000 in cash or in-kind advertising. The applicant's looking for cash, and we recommend the award here to the Green Action Center, Compost Winnipeg. Again, this year, they were the only applicant. They've been successful, I think, the duration of the program. So it's that's the report before you to authorize us awarding it to Green Action Center.
So moved.
Go ahead, Council.
So moved to award as per the public service recommendation, 1 through 4.
Minute?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm one thing though. So that program, that also, like, they're getting some results out there for doing composting and stuff. So we have the waste management report coming.
Yes,
Report and so measurement of effectiveness and diversion.
yeah,
We've got that measured, right?
you're correct. Yeah, later in the agenda here, a couple of reports in, we have the waste management strategy annual report. And part of this, one of the services the Green Action Center does here at Compost Winnipeg is the self-haul, the depots we have set up where residents can self-haul organics, and we have some tonnage reporting in that. It's going very well.
Great. So I have a motion there, so all those in favor? Aye. Nobody's opposed, that is carried. Report number 2.
It's, we have a little bit of discussion on report number 2, because I'm confused on a lot of items on there.
Sure. So report number 2 is the proposed agreement for services for land drainage sewer at 879 Isbister. So this is one of our, we've been to committee with a couple of these reports recently. So anytime a developer is required to upgrade part of the sewer system or water system, I guess, upgrading part of the system to facilitate what they're trying to build, we have to enter a legal agreement because they build it and then they turn it over to us for operation forever. So in this situation, there's a developer trying to build a 2-story multifamily It's situated in Isbister, that's near Hamilton and Isbister. It's in the Parkdale separated district. It needs to extend the land drainage sewer about 25 meters. So the developer pays and builds for it, designs it, and then the city owns it. But in order to do that, we need a council approved legal agreement to do that. So this is, that's the agreement for services here.
We had one with, like 2 months ago,
Yeah.
with the daycare at Litz and Henderson.
Yes, correct.
Okay, my question is, this is from the property to Isbister Street, so it's 25 meters, that's the length from the connection at the property to Isbister?
I think it's along its district.
It's along Isbister, yeah.
Oh, you mean it's along Isbister?
Yeah, it's the main land drainage sewer that's being extended.
Okay, now that land drainage sewer, that's for water? For rainwater?
Runoff,
Yeah.
runoff.
For runoff, okay, so why are we gonna have the runoff?
They're redeveloping the property into a multifamily, and when we have a multifamily, you need to have a connection to the land drainage sewer.
Okay, I see lots of, lot splits that has multifamily. I don't remember ever seeing anything like this, so I'm a little confused. We have lots of, lot splits that have 2 units go up, and then there's basically 4 families in there, but I've never seen us require a land drainage sewer. Or it's never come here that I've seen.
If there's already a land drainage sewer, or, if they're doing some on-site work, where they, retain the runoff on site, we may not see it. But it's a requirement that they need to have a connection for the site runoff, if it's 4 units or more.
Okay, if it's 4 units or more, so tell me how this water is gonna run off. So it rains, and we have a little bit of surface water, it's gonna go where? Into some hole somewhere, and then it goes to
Catch basin.
Catch basin,
Yeah,
parking lot,
in their parking lot. They're gonna have a catch basin?
correct, yes. That's
Oh,
typically
okay,
how
so
it
that's a back
happens.
lane.
Yeah.
Oh, so you didn't specify. So it's gonna have a catch basin in the back lane.
Well, it'll be, the land drainage is in the front lane, right?
Yeah, the catch
Yeah.
basin, it faces or abuts the public back lane, but then the land drainage extension is in the front.
Okay, so
So
you
they'll
have a
just-
catch basin in the back lane, and it'll go all the way to the front.
Correct, yeah.
So we won't have a problem in our back lane with too much water. Cause that is a concern.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
like it changes, the idea is, the existing, whatever is there now, produces a certain amount of runoff when it rains. They're changing the existing buildings, they're adding a parking lot, changing the roof size, those kind of stuff, so it will increase how much runoff, it will change the peak flow of the runoff, and so to accommodate that change without making an impact on the neighborhood.
I understand that perfectly, and that's one of the reasons why I've never liked fourplexes, because we're changing our total environment.
Mhm.
The fact that we have to put in a land drainage sewer explains that
Yeah.
the water will no longer be able to be absorbed by the ground, so it has to be redirected elsewhere. Thank you for, at least now I understand. Okay, so the catch basin's in the back lane, more or less,
Mhm.
and it'll be driven out.
Directed around the property.
Right to the street, so we won't have any problems in the back lane. Thank you.
Would you like to move it, Councillor Dawson?
Hmm?
Would you like to move them?
No, I would not like to move it, because I'm probably gonna vote against it.
Okay, I'll move it. I think it is necessary. I think it would be, but, a protective stance, to, vote, in favor of what's needed when development happens. Even though I appreciate many counselors aren't really interested in fourplexes, I do. When they happen though, and I'll point out in parts of my ward, where they happen, they oftentimes can result in better drainage than the adjacent 200-year-old property. So I'll just point that out to occupy the space that sometimes the good materials that we have nowadays helps helps the city. So I'm prepared to move and appreciate the frank comments, though.
Sounds good. All those in favor? Anybody opposed?
I'm opposed.
Opposed, okay.
Yeah, we clearly are supposed to.
So according to opposition, okay, and I'm in favor, motion, so it passes. All right. Report number 3. Yes, the climate change. Yeah.
Yes, so this is our Winnipeg Climate Action Plan. It's a 2025 annual report. We report every year on progress. Danny Powell is here from Office of Sustainability to provide a slideshow presentation of some of the highlights and some of the data. Before he starts, I just want to flag, and we do summarize some of this in the executive summary, but a lot of the work we do, I mean, it's very important work. It's tied to our climate policy, and a lot of customers do ask us from time to time, like, what are we doing? How are we doing? And we do have stats here to present, but I do want to point out, like, a lot of the work doesn't necessarily, it's not as visible often. Like, we do have a lot of stuff in action right now that will maybe show more benefit as time goes on. But like, we're updating the Winnipeg Climate Action Plan. The overall updated plan is underway, so that's a larger project. All the zoning and process changes made, this past year, directing growth to service transit supported and walkable neighborhoods, that ties into helping us meet some of these goals in our climate plan. The building emissions reduction strategy was approved. Our zero emission buses fleet was increased. One of the things too that maybe have flown under a lot of people's radar that I'm kind of excited about, we did secure funding for a district geothermal system feasibility study and business case. And so when we get those results back, like, I really think I'm very interested in how this is going. So there's a lot of things kind of on the ground that should have larger impact in the coming years. The other thing to note, and I know Danny has some slides on it, when we start talking about our stats, like our carbon budget, we are behind. We are making some progress, like I said, with some of these policies, but we're not going to meet our targets unless we significantly start to improve these reductions. And so with the climate plan update and with some of these other initiatives, we're hoping to have a new plan that will kind of help identify, how we can meet the, we've got the roadmap and we're looking to make some more improvements. But right now, some of these stats don't look so great, but yeah, there's still time for us to improve what we're doing. So having said that, I'll turn over to Danny and he will walk us through this time.
Thank you very much for having me. So, as Tim said, I'll be reporting on the Winnipeg Climate Action Plan 2025 report. So for context, all of our commitments for greenhouse gas reductions come from the adoption of our Winnipeg 2045, which stated that we would have that 20% reduction in total emissions by 2030 and head for net zero by 2050. And that's all in comparison to our emissions levels for 2011. I won't repeat what Tim said, but we have gone, as a city, we have lots of actions that have gone towards improving our plans and focusing our efforts towards emissions reductions. And just sectorally, we have our main sectors of impacts are buildings, transportation, local energy, and waste. And for all of these sectors, we have actions and we have plans around those reductions. And also we have, not just in terms of emissions reductions, but we are, there's a lot of work going on around resilience, so planning for climate change that we know is happening and will be increasing with time. And so there's actions in terms of green spaces, which we've heard about already today, and also planning for those extreme weather events like high heat days and the health requirements for the community around that. So we're going to jump ahead to slide 11 here. In terms of our energy use and emissions as an organization, our emissions come from 5 different categories or sectors. Those are corporate waste, so waste that goes to the landfill at Brady, water and wastewater infrastructure, from streetlights, from the vehicle fleet, and from the buildings that we operate. Now, streetlights we mostly ignore because we don't have a lot of control over streetlights and their actual impact in terms of emissions and energy use is fairly small. But for everything else, like corporate waste, though, doesn't have an energy use component. So our main areas of focus for our energy use are water and wastewater infrastructure, vehicle fleet, and buildings. So our major energy user is the vehicle fleet, and the vehicle fleet primarily is using fossil fuels, so very carbon intensive energy source, though that will be changing as transit decarbonizes. Similarly, our buildings sector is using a mix of electricity and natural gas to keep the buildings operating and warm enough for us to use in winter. And water and wastewater infrastructure is obviously using energy to keep the water moving, whether that's water or wastewater. But in terms of emissions, our corporate waste sector is huge. It's responsible for 66% of all of our emissions, so almost 2/3. And that kind of dwarfs everything else. But if we ignore that for a moment, we can see that the relatively more carbon intensive sector of the vehicle fleet takes up a larger proportion of what remains than in the energy sector. So if we can focus on the carbon intensive sectors, we actually can have an outsized impact in terms of what our actions can give us. So in 2025, our energy use was about 2.7 million gigajoules of energy across all the different kinds of energy we use. That's about a 1.5% increase from the previous year. Now, we have a decreased energy use in the water and wastewater sector, and I think that's primarily coming from it being a low precipitation year. The more precipitation that we get, the more that water gets into our combined sewer system, and then the water treatment plants have to treat it as if it was polluted water, and so it has to be treated before it's released. And so as a result, we have a decrease in energy use last year. But for the building sector and the vehicle fleet, there was increases there, and that would be mostly because of an increase in transit usage, which is, I think, a good news story. But also, we had a colder year, and so there was more natural gas used in our building sector. In terms of emissions, our emissions went up about 1.6% to about 325,000 tons of carbon dioxide or equivalents. And again, this was an increase across all sectors. While we did have an energy use decrease in water and wastewater, we used relatively more natural gas. And so with natural gas being that more carbon intensive fuel source, our emissions actually went up a little bit. And you can see our actual largest increase is in the corporate waste sector, and that's only a 1% increase. The corporate waste means we got 2,000 tons of additional carbon dioxide equivalent that we've committed to going forward, because that's been put into the landfill. So any diversion effort has decreased that. So over time, if we take out waste, we can see that these are the sectors that we have the most control over, again, ignoring streetlights for a moment too. Since 2020, we've had relatively consistent emissions year to year across buildings, vehicle fleet, and water and wastewater. And the only variations that we're really seeing are coming from changes in weather. So again, where we have less precipitation, we're going to have we're going to have lower energy use and emissions in the water and wastewater sector. But where we have a colder winter, we're going to have more natural gas use, and that's going to increase our emissions. And you can see that heating load, this here's a graph showing that red line is showing us our heating load requirements, just from how cold it is outside, and then our buildings' energy use and emissions. You can see there's a really tight connection between that heating demand and our energy use. And what we would like to do is we would like to move it so that there is less impact from increased heating demand on our energy use. That comes through better systems, better heating systems, and through more insulation. Ideally, year over year, there would just be a straight decrease in building energy use if we were able to do that. We can see the impacts, though, of targeted actions. So where we have instituted waste diversion efforts, again, waste being our major carbon emission source, we've seen really significant impacts. So by doing paper and cardboard recycling, leaf and yard waste, and diversion, soil fabrication, we've actually managed to, since 2011, we've reduced, this year, we managed to get about 100,000 tons in terms of emissions reductions. So our emissions from waste would have been about 50% higher than they are right now. And I think that shows what looking at one sector and looking at one part of that sector's contribution, that kind of targeted action can have really significant impacts. This is showing our emissions over time. And again, we also have our net zero path. So we know what our emissions were in 2011, and we know what we need to get to in 2030. And so we can draw a straight line between those two emissions levels. And year over year, we see that our corporate emissions are above what that amount is. And so while we can chart what our emissions levels should be year over year, and again, from 2011 to 2030, we should be dropping by about 1% per year. With us being consistently above that emissions level, we have accumulated a kind of carbon debt. So the sum of how much we have overspent our carbon year over year, in 2025, we spent all of 2026's carbon. So we're a full year behind in that respect. And with this going forward, if we aren't making more aggressive cuts to our emissions, by 2037, we will have spent our entire carbon budget out to 2050. And by 2050, we will have overspent our carbon budget by about 54%. So that'll be about 14 years worth of carbon at the rate we're going. If you have any questions,
Yes, I have a question. Emissions, you mentioned our vehicles, transit and our trucks, cars, etc. Do we have a percentage? Like all our non-transit vehicles, how much are they using?
I don't know that number offhand. I would have to look back at my numbers.
Okay.
But I'm.
All right, aside from that, are we pushing to get, for at least the cars and trucks, etc., are we pushing to get hybrid models or in some cases all electric?
I believe fleet has that as a policy, and that does come before committee.
Because that would certainly save a little bit of emissions. I should see the number going down. I don't know about the transit, it going up.
Well,
unless we have more vehicles.
Yeah, for transit going forward, I think that with the electrification program, I think we're going to see some really interesting drops there, and I'll have to start including electricity in the vehicle as far as you mentioned.
My other question revolves around our electric grid. So can we supply all the electricity for our transit buses that convert to electrical?
I believe that's part of the transit's electrification study, and I don't think I can talk.
No, it's okay. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Part of the new garage build that
Yes.
they're doing out on Route 9.
I'm good. That's good.
Question, if I may.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Did you want to ask questions before Council rules before I start?
I'm finished. Thank you.
If with whatever you'd like, Mr. Chair, I do have questions.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So, I mean, I think the elephant in the room is a bit on the diversion side of waste with respect to not having an organics program to the extent that other cities do. Would you be able to comment on it? And generally, I'm interested, you mentioned fleet. decarbonization, you mentioned buildings. Generally, I'm interested in your chart that has us blowing past 2030 to 2050. So if you could get us back on track by doing 3 or 4 key actions, what would that be?
Yeah, sorry, the organics, absolutely excellent point. And we are working as fast as we can on organics. I know we do talk a little bit about it in our next report here, but from the curbside, citywide, organics will help that not just our diversion target for tonnage, but will help reduce the emissions from landfills over time. It is a big part of it. We are working on like an overall corporate reductions, waste reduction strategy as well, just in terms of other materials that corporately all city departments produce. And the point about the the one of the slides Dan you had up there, where there's a disproportionate the carbon intensive transportation and building heating are areas where we can see we can make gains if we make progress on things like district heating systems and fleet electrification. And I know that the Focus Transit has a study on zero emissions buses and working towards that, but also like fleet does have a work at not just even just reducing our fleet, like looking at low utilization units and trying to like minimize, get the actual optimal number of units so that we're using them more efficiently, but also looking at anti-idling policies and using electric vehicles where we can, or smaller utility vehicles instead of full vehicles at plants, that kind of thing. So it's kind of like I think there's a lot of smaller things that add up to larger policy things.
Does it add though, like, if I may, does it add, I mean, when we don't have organics diversion, when we're behind on our organics processing capacity, even when there's no residential food waste diversion, save for these little micro projects in the same way other cities have, it looks like we're seeing increases in tonnage that way. So is that the biggest bang for our buck? If we were to try and go for 2030 and say, well, it's just unacceptable to move it out a year, is that it, I'm gonna suspend judgment on all space, time, cost, etc. But is that how, if you're out there and the headline is, here's how Winnipeg can still get to 2030, is that expediting the organics program? Is it has to be part of the equation to meet 2030?
I think it absolutely has to be part of the equation. That's my understanding. But to be fair, we are like the climate action plan update, like the overall update, is looking at what levers should we be pulling harder? What new levers can we pull? I don't know if that's a great analogy, but we're just saying that we are looking at a review and update of the overall climate action plan. And we do have the community energy investment roadmap. It is a tool that does identify, things, that we can do to have those kind of impacts. But
The kind of impacts that we actually meet the 2030 goal, you mean?
yeah, well, this year was structured around the 2030 and 2050 goals. But I guess this is a long-winded answer saying, yes, I believe organics is very important. It's part of the solution for sure.
And then number 2 would be fleet decarbonization, or would it be building? Based on just the numbers and the emissions impacts, because fleet is the second largest source.
Fleet is the second largest source of emissions and also of energy use, or it's the most energy intensive. Certainly electrification of the fleet would have a pretty solid impact. I don't know what the per dollar for $100,000 invested, what our carbon reductions would be. But
just to echo what was just said, I think we can think in terms of smaller actions, but more of them. Because if you, going back to that, that waste, that was the waste graph I showed, like, that isn't from a single diversion effort. Each of those diversion efforts are between 10 and 20,000 tons per year. But all of them together has come up to 100,000 tons just this year. And that's 100,000 tons also last year and 100,000 tons the year before. And so by getting those actions going, I think like it's, you know, smaller actions across the organization, they add up.
They, in theory, could add up. Have we done the chart and the math on that? Like comparing top 3 versus small? And where can I find that? Because that, I mean, that it's, in some respects, it's easy to, it's a bit easier to get our head around a large project, even though, I mean, we have 4 years left. So for instance, electrification, when any non-commercial outfit is waiting quite a bit for an electrical car, is a difficult reach to turn over a fleet, right? Especially given not so much the buses, but we did backtrack on some bus commitments. So, you know, the tracking smaller projects, we need to have a sense, and I think that's what you're saying in terms of the update. But will it be laid out at that plane? What is the route to 2030, 2040? Because all of a sudden, we're not even talking about 2030, we're talking about 2050, right? And so is that math and charting you've done?
Well, some of that was done in the community and
SEER.
investment road,
Yeah.
the SEER. And there is a section that does have a estimated cost benefit and carbon impacts. I can't remember the page offhand that summarizes that, but
Yes, but my point is that, and even an entrepreneurial counselor or resident would have to take that list and then plug and play to do the math, right? It hasn't even been presented to council that way, right? Like, and I'm interested in presenting to council that way. Is that something that we could ask to say, here in theory, if this was of interest to council, meeting 2030, or what would 2035 look like, 2040, you would need to plug and play essentially the list of projects relative to the commitment, council commitment and budget allocation. And that, those are options you can get to through SEER for sure. You'd have to still go back to this document a bit in terms of what the math looks like to 2030, 2040, 2050. It's not, it's imprecise, right? But is that something that you have at the ready or you've gamed out a bit? Because you're mentioning smaller, and yet small can be powerful and meaningful. Small can't be powerful and meaningful. There's a collection of, over a dozen, to 30 of those. So that it's hard to track through for decision makers. It's hard for me to, it can be done, but is there something more plain that can be delivered to council on a more tied up manner, or to residents? Because I think frankly, any resident that is upset that we're going to blow past the 2030 target, and it's been that kind of a year, past 2 years for climate. It's been repeated bad news over and over on the global stage, not just for the city. So if folks are interested in, some accountability, how could we look at that?
I think it would make it easier to educate people because they're not gonna,
I think that's a great point. I think I understand your question.
Yeah,
And I think it is definitely something I know we've been looking at, even overall communicating, to your point, if we have a whole bunch of different things that can all kind of add into meeting, council policy goal, but they aren't, it's not, there's no visible linkage in reporting. Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. Like if there was at least some document, we could present a summary, list that could tie individual contributions to the overall goal, so that, to your point, you could see, well, this initiative actually helps us out with the climate plan as well. I know the Climate Action Resilience Committee of the Citizens Committee has we just had the motion last council about communication work. So I think, coordinating with that and we've been working on direction coming out of there too, to better communicate not just the actions they're doing, but the importance of some of those actions. So I think we'll have to take that away.
I just wanted to confirm a couple of things, like, so we had increased emissions at the Brady, what do we call it? The Brady Resource
Recovery
Facility. So there was some kind of mechanical problem or something with the methane collection system.
No, we have part of the gas capture off for maintenance, but no, the issue here would be more so the wet rainfall precipitation piece or change and degradation. So I don't it wasn't necessarily because we had a mechanical problem.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, just so you have to, we have to cap off when we do repairs, and we had a couple of major repairs to some of our laterals, which are the system that draws the gas into the pipe and brings it to our flare. So we have to turn off sections of the landfill when we're doing the maintenance on those. So because they were down for such a long time, our actual gas that was diverted to the flare was less than the year before. And then that doesn't mean the gas went into the air. It just means it's kept inside the landfill. It wasn't drawn out. But there is a formula that they use to calculate what the potential increase of emission of methane that may have gone out because of that. Is that a fair comment?
Well, actually, yes, it's based on the gas capture levels, but we're also, we calculate things a little bit differently than it is reported in the waste, because we're talking more about the commitment we've got by putting to this year's waste into a landfill. We're committing to that, and those emissions coming out eventually anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we divert things for this year, we want to be able to see the impact of this year's diversion effort. So a bit of a different way of calculating it.
Okay. Just following through on that though, so there is capture of methane, it's channeled to the burn. I believe we have the final agreement signed with the P3 business that's going to be selling, putting, what do we call that, biogas or whatever, into
Renewable
the
natural gas,
into the natural gas system. So that's the system that's collecting that now will be directed to, rather than to a burn, would be directed through this new process.
We don't have an agreement finalized yet. Just we're sorting out the market issues with where it would be marketed to. Just sorting out the financials still. So we don't have anything to report on yet.
Yeah. So just for our presenter climate change report. So what effect is that going to have? Like, there's still going to be natural gas that's being used by somebody. So there will be release of carbon. like, what effect would that have, once that's in place and they're doing that, what effect would that have on our net zero emission goals?
Sorry, what impact will having renewable natural gas?
Using the RNG, yeah.
Well, as I understand the project, it's going to increase how much gas we're pulling out of the landfills. So that right there, that'll reduce our total emissions from waste. And then it will offset, depending on how the gas is used, it may end up offsetting our emissions related to natural gas.
Okay, I was just curious about when that'll start. I mean, it's not really net zero, right? Like, there is carbon that eventually is released from the burning of that natural gas, right? So,
I guess, but burning the landfill gas prevents it from being released as methane.
yeah,
So.
which is way better. Yeah, I know
Yes,
that.
the carbon equivalent, it's actually a reduction in carbon equivalent released into the atmosphere if you're burning the methane as natural gas after it's processed.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Yeah, no, and that's really good, but, and you know, the method at the new plant and the old plant, things a source of energy to heat.
Sewage plant, yes, and New Pick, yeah, correct.
Yeah, so, I mean, those are good. Is the new system, will it be more efficient at utilizing the methane, or are we pretty well at?
I'm not sure if it's the technical performance of it, but it'll be newer equipment. This is talking about the gas capture, so the New Pick, the new methane capture, it'll be newer equipment, so presumably newer should be a little bit better, but I don't know if it's significantly more.
I was asked this question. So, yeah, we're buying almost zero emission electric buses because it is still utilizing diesel, I believe, in order to heat and cool our buses, which are a requirement for, you know, customers and the driver. So that's not really net zero. You know, like, it's not zero, it's almost zero. And some of these other things we'll be doing, they're almost zero. Like, even if you go to the curbside, and I'm sure it'll be calculated in some formula, but well, for example, right now we have the Manitoba company that's collecting the west side, and they're using natural gas vehicles, I believe, right? Compressed natural gas.
Actually, the east side contract, and that's our current contractor is going to be switching their fleet to CNG. Yes.
Yeah, so that gets us some reduction points as well, right? But it's still going to be releasing carbon to operate those vehicles, which are I haven't heard of any fully electric, like garbage collection vehicles or anything like that. That doesn't exist, is that right?
No, they do exist. There are some municipalities in Canada that do use them, smaller ones, but
And they're electric?
yeah. And they're also hybrid too. They have a combination diesel and electric. So some of the components are operated through electric, and then there's still some components that require a generation process, which would be like to charge the vehicles while they're similar to the cars you have today, the hybrid cars. So yeah.
Okay. And that contribute, so under the contract, whatever they're doing with the vehicles, if it's reducing emissions and it's under a contract, that gives us a percentage increase?
Yes, any effort we make to switch to a more a less carbon intensive fuel or energy source is an improvement in terms of our accounting for carbon emissions.
Okay. Well, there's many questions I could ask, but just in terms of, you know, that, so you got compost collection. So there will still be some fossil fuel unless the electric vehicles become more cheaper to purchase and so on, but so that's not really getting us to zero. It's a reduction, but it's not really getting us to zero, which is a goal. There's many things we are doing that doesn't technically get you totally to that, but Ed, I know the process for the compost processing plant is in process and it's happening. That plant's going to need to use some kind of energy, I believe. Is it being looked at in terms of a building that could be heated with in-ground heat pumps or that kind of thing that also gives us points?
So the compost facility, processing facility would be, you know, merchant built, merchant operated, and then turned over to the city at the period. I think they're probably looking at anything to make it as efficient as possible.
That's under our contract. It's under contract with us, though, right?
Yes.
So, just like the garbage collection and recycle collection. Okay. Anyway, hopefully that will contribute. Anyway, so ultimately we have a goal of net zero, but like it's not achievable, is it? You know, given the state of things we're moving to and
Just to clarify for a second, the term net zero does not mean that we will have no emissions across the organization. It means that we will be able to, we'll lower our emissions to the point where we can have offsetting actions. So those could be anything that emits carbon, pulls it out of the atmosphere through some method, whether that's planting trees, establishing green spaces. But it requires us to get down to where those smaller actions can offset what carbon we do create.
so we can, for example, does that market still exist where businesses who say you can sell your reductions in greenhouse gas to another organization to
Carbon credits.
and paying, yeah, so the city might pay for it. Like we're getting points for all the trees we're planting. Well, some we're losing and trees we're planting. We're getting some points under this as well, right? But that's another way to offset. So, like you won't be at zero, so you can buy credits if that exists.
Yeah, I believe we're investigating what would be required for us to even sell our carbon credits. So the gas capture and renewable natural gas facility at Brady would involve the possibility of us being able to sell credits on that carbon market. And we may end up even buying other carbon credits going forward. But I think there's a lot of hand waving between now and then to figure out what.
Okay. All right. No further questions, colleagues?
I have a bit of a question.
Sure.
So, currently, the motion here for, this, would be to, receive this information. Yes. When we, the council, when we concurred in, the item in going back in, 2018, when we were all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I'm speaking only for myself, we really were aiming for that goal year 2030. And so as we've discussed, there's various plans and this is an annual report for the Winnipeg Climate Action Plan. We have the investment roadmap and we need to see some of these documents in concert. I am interested in moving a motion that would recognize the projects that we have and recognize the operational initiatives that we have, but also recognize that if council was interested in a stretch goal for 2030, that the current trajectory would be 2050. And so if we were interested in 2040 being a year or 2032 being a year, what are some of the items we would be tracking or adopted? And so I'm wondering if we could come back with those at the next meeting to be able to give a clearer indication of, can you pull this up?
Oh, sure.
Sorry, a clear indication of what the public service direction would be if we, as a council, wanted a clear understanding of how individual capital projects, operational initiatives, or major climate actions, like the one we discussed, expediting, could collectively contribute toward it actually achieving our emissions reduction objectives by 2030. And so if we could pull together a 1-2 page tracking document, because right now we receive it as information.
Yeah.
It looks like 2 thumbs up for 2050. But if we change the motion to a direction to prepare a report to come back in the next meeting, even if it's in draft for like verbally, to get a tracking document that would, you look at the current trajectory, we know it's 2050 now, look at what corporate GHG reduction targets we could have within, the current approved projects. And then if we added some of those smaller ones together, could we get to 2032, 2035, 2040? And if that was interest, is there something we could pull together to provide that in a concise document? I will endeavor to try. If the answer is no, but I wanted the public service feedback on that.
Well, first I want to make a comment. This whole thing is going through an update right now, and we're expecting a report back to council in spring of 20.
I'm not sure. When's the Winnipeg Climate Action Plan update?
I'd have to double check those deadlines, sorry.
I think it's spring. It's the last thing I heard. It's going.
I would
through.
still want a motion
No, I understand.
if you're discussing the motion that I'm proposing with me.
Well, I just wanted to, Council Rolls, can I finish?
You can finish, Council
Thank you.
Edie.
Okay, please. I just want to also. Well, they can answer. Can you get something ready for our next meeting, which would be in September?
Might be tight, I'm just thinking in terms of, sorry,
The people that work on this are working on the update.
verbal is better than written. I'm just thinking September, so September 11th, we'd have to have it ready. I'm not sure if it would be comprehensive enough, but we'll do whatever we need to do to try to deadline. I'd be nervous about committing to September just because of the timelines between now and August. But then that doesn't help because if we don't make September, there's no October meeting, right? Because election, and then it's November, December.
So I know it's tight, but I also realized that it was suggested in this meeting that I could pull it together. And so by just, looking at both documents, which, I'll take up as a challenge and race the department, but and certainly, be happy to you know, work on something, you know, and say, do you mean this, you know? Yours would be, of course, more comprehensive than mine, but I think that I'd be interested in laying this over to the September meeting to see if we couldn't get something together. I think it's a pretty straightforward presentation that draws a line right to 2050. That's new for us, right? I don't believe if we've talked about that in a report before. If we've talked about that so boldly in a presentation before, that we're blowing past 2030, going right to 2050, maybe in SEER. That's a pretty interesting visual.
So again, laying this over and
Mhm.
adding to it also is the same process, I believe, as coming up with a new report.
I'm not asking for a report, I'm asking for a 1 to 2 pager that copies what was in the SEER report, something that the department suggested that I could do, which I
Get it
can.
verbally then?
And it's now, you know, I mean, I still appreciate everybody has other things to do, so do I. But I'm interested in the motion and oftentimes when you put forward a motion, the department does come back and say, we didn't get to it, right? Can we have an extension, right?
Not to be verbal.
Yes, I'm interested in verbal.
That's the
Yeah.
motion, right? We lay this over. It's not really important that it goes to council, right?
Well, I
So
would
we
like
could lay
it
this,
to
we
go to
could lay the
council.
report over so they could give you a verbal report.
No.
on the two.
No, that's not the motion. I'll get the
Well, you don't want that
motion.
then, okay.
That's-
I don't,
That's not the intent. The
well, I don't
intent
see
is
how it's
to,
verbal. then.
well, because the report would be that the public service be directed to prepare a verbal report back at the Standing Policy Committee on Water and Waste and the Environment on a corporate tracking document that would get us, you know, to in line to shorter term goals than 2050. So that would be the motion and it
So
would
it's verbal,
still go
that's
up
what I
to council. Yeah, it's
You
still
just said
verbal.
it's verbal. so-
Oh, but my intention isn't to lay the matter,
Alright.
the report over.
You don't want to lay the report, this report over?
No, the report is what it is. It's,
Okay. All right,
you know.
okay. So first of all, I'll
Is it
call the.
question first, is it possible to do a verbal? Can
It's
you
probably-
get the material together?
Without having spoken to the subject matter experts, I can commit to our best attempts, and if we can't, then I'll have.
I'll ask for it, okay, you'll ask for an extension, okay.
But we can definitely try for it, to try to get something, and if it'd be a verbal report, obviously, maybe we have a slide deck so that you get a table out of it, or like that sort of thing, but we can try for that.
Okay, that's good enough for me. And we got it.
Great, okay, so I'm gonna call the question on receiving this report. This information, which I believe is the recommendation. Moving that, Councillor Dobson? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's-
I'm not in favor. I would like to see a motion.
We do have one coming.
I would like to receive the report as information and add an amendment, which is
Well,
that we're getting.
what's the difference? What's the difference if you amend
The
it
difference-
or if you move a new business motion?
Yes, thank you for asking. what
No, I'm the
difference is.
chairperson, you know, Councillor
Is
Rowland.
that a question? Is that a legitimate question?
I already
Mr.
asked the clerk.
Is that a legitimate question, Mr.
Your
Chair?
motion
You said,
can
what's the
be-
difference? I'm going to
Your
explain. what the
motion
difference
is a separate motion.
No, that is in your mind, Mr. Chair. Like
No,
I said,
It can be done that way, and that's the way it's gonna be done.
well, that is a matter of voting, isn't it?
Call the question on your motion, which is separate, so.
No, that was not separate. That was not my intention, Mr. Chair. It was amending motion for information, but I can lose a vote. I don't, you know, it happens all the time. I can lose a vote on information. I'll just be voting against it because I want to see a motion on this.
All right,
It's Councillor Rowland's.
please add the amendment.
So then the motion is that the recommendation of the Winnipeg Public Service be concurred in with the following amendment.
Yes,
As Councilor Rowland stated, would you like me to read into the record? Sure. Okay, that the Winnipeg Public Service be, so add following recommendation 2, that the public service be directed to prepare and provide a verbal report back to the Standing Policy Committee on Water, Waste and Environment for their September meeting, for the September meeting, Council?
Yes, please.
For the September meeting, 2026 on the following. A corporate tracking document on remaining emissions reduction gap between the city's current trajectory and its adopted 2030 corporate GHG reduction target. Given current approved projects, funding, and implementation schedules, with the goal of creating a 1 or 2 page tracking document that is a clear evaluation of targets feasible if the city wants to reach 2030. We can have this as B, and B, projects it would need to consider if alternative achievement pathways for 2032, 2035, and 2040 are of interest.
To council.
To council.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nobody's opposed, that is carried. Yeah. We're gonna take a break now for 7 minutes.
Yeah, well, you.
I know.
Thank you.
Call the meeting of the Water, Waste and Environment back to order. We are now on report number 4, which is the waste, is that the, yeah, waste management strategy?
Yes,
Annual report.
the Comprehensive Integrated Waste Management Strategy, DIWMS 2025 Annual Report.
Is there a
So,
recommendation here to change the name?
not in this annual report, we did the 5-year review of the strategy. The 5-year review, report is pending. It'll be here, hopefully by the end of the year. I can spoil one of the recommendations in that review. One of the recommendations in that review is to rename this, so it's not CIWMS anymore, but this report is just the annual statistics on, how our waste management strategy is going. So there's a lot of information in here, a lot of metrics provided in this report. Couple I'll highlight, the self-haul for organics, we mentioned this earlier this morning. The self-haul for organics program, where at several community centers, residents can bring organics and put them in there for free. That's reporting 398 tons in 2025. So it's almost 400 tons in 2025. Now, if you compare to 2024 was only 63 tons. I mean, it was only October, started in October. But if you kind of prorate that as to how much per month, 2.5 months, it would be seasonal a little bit, but 2024 was at a rate that would have been 300. So if it's 400 in 2025, I'm comfortable saying it's increasing in uptake and seems to be doing good. We'll see what the 2026 numbers are. But yeah, so I wanted to highlight that. The other thing I want to highlight, pretty much every year we've done this report for the last couple of years, 0 biosolids have been landfilled, which is a really great story for the department. We don't landfill biosolids anymore. We use them for the soil fab program mostly, and a little bit of land application. The numbers there have increased. Soil fab is basically the same, 35,000 tons, 38,000 tons, 38,500 tons versus 38,000 tons in 2024. So it's a little bit up, but the land application's gone up from 24,000 tons in 2024 to 27,000 tons. So between land application, soil fab, pardon me, in those two activities, we divert 100% of our biosolids or stabilized sludge. We have 100% of it is diverted from the landfill. That's great news. That's another example of something that actually has a tie into climate plans that isn't necessarily obvious, but yeah, I like highlighting that every time we do this annual report. A few other things like our collection performance stats. This is where we report our collection performance stats and efficiencies that improved. The collection performance improved. Our 4R depot visits and tonnages are up. There's a lot of stuff in here. I'm going to turn it over. Mike Gorchuk's here, manager of solid waste, here for any questions and to highlight any of the things as well. But yeah, it's our annual report and there's a lot in it.
Well, I think the singles are summed it up pretty good. We've seen decreases in overall waste that we've handled at the landfill. So our waste is down. The per capita down. Obviously, our diversion rate has been pretty stagnant. It has been for quite some time, and we've highlighted that in order to make a significant jump in our diversion rate. That the residential organics program would be key to that. But yeah, no, overall it was it's some positive signs in here. So
I do have one question. What's the estimated tonnage of organic that would be going into the curbside collection?
I believe that number's 40,000 tons per year.
40,000, okay. And this small program here, it's getting 400. Wow, that's okay. Interesting, yes.
One question, the leaf and yard waste collection, that's pretty well the same. It's been around 3.6 million, the cost.
To the cost of it, yeah, well, that contract is a per ton basis, so depending on the tonnage amount we collect in the year, would depend on what the cost to collect it.
My question kind of revolves around, as the demand increased, have we been having more compost?
No.
The leaf and yard waste collection, has it increased or is it kind
And
of
that's
stabilized?
but it's not that it's stabilized, it's very, there's a lot of volatility in that, because you could have a dry year and you'll have very little tonnage collected.
Yeah.
So you're not gonna generate a lot of compost. Or you could have a wet year where it's gonna be higher, so you'll see that number fluctuates year over year, but I think over the last couple of years, it's been pretty steady.
Yeah, just sure, because it's wet. We're gonna go up. Okay.
There's a table of tonnages on, I guess it's page 8 of the PDF. It's in section 4. There's a table, the last 10 years or so of tonnages. Yeah.
It's been pretty stable.
Yeah, it's just minor bumps to Mike's point. It's maybe like on the wet. Wet year. Wet years, 2022, 2020. Yeah. So
if we have a really wet year, the number will go up, and if we don't have a wet year and it's very dry, then the grass and leaves and all that will be minimized. Okay.
There's like 15 storms.
Less grass cutting. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions, Councillor Dawson? Councillor Rhodes?
I'm good.
You good? Yeah, anyway, we're not good. Okay. So community centers, but it's, I think there's at, West End in Daniel McIntyre Ward, Cindy Clausen Rec Center has the ability to drop organic waste there. Yeah, so it's not just community centers.
There's a list on our website. And obviously the 4 depots are those locations, but yeah, it's mostly community centers. Pollock's Hardware Co-op on 1407 Main Street. That's one. The Donald Neighborhood Museum and Visitor Center. Carlton Street. That's a drop-off point. We do modify these from time to time as well. Like we look at to add a few or change them around, and we do that. Always, any of our customers listening, you can always look at our website. We map them and have a list as well for where you can drop them.
Okay, and you were gonna, what was it again? Climate action and Compost Winnipeg?
Compost Winnipeg is the number.
So does that program get expanded through them?
Yes, any expansions would go through them. That is essentially it's their program and they're providing the operational support to do that program. So they're doing the collection and the processing. So we meet with them regularly. So they'll we are looking to try and expand the program. There's no set rate as to how many or when or where.
Okay, Compost Winnipeg, right now, they're trying to work more and more with organic waste through commercial operations. have you had any meetings with them to discuss how we might be able to support them? I think they were looking to get provincial dollars to expand that program.
That would be a
And all we, and under legislation, all waste, solid waste in Winnipeg falls to the city of Winnipeg, like even commercial, but we don't. Anyway, so have you had any discussions or meetings with them about that?
Not to my knowledge, no.
No?
Not on the commercial side, no. That's entirely that. If that's their, they've kind of made that niche for themselves as to where, and they have their residential collection program that they operate, which, that grant that was just approved goes to help support.
Yeah.
But as far as what their future plans are, and we haven't discussed.
I don't know. Anyway, maybe if we tried to assist them in obtaining provincial money, maybe we could add another point to reducing organics. So anyway, it's an interesting concept. Anyway, all right. So does somebody want to move?
I'll move that we receive this report as information.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's, actually, yeah, nobody's opposed. It passes.
Report number 5. Report number 5, it's exciting. This is award of contract for Armstrong Sewer Relief Works. This is contract 1. So it is a big contract, $33.8 million. This is part of our CSO program. This is going to install a new wastewater sewer on parts of McPhillips, Leela, Aikens, Armstrong, Maine, and McGregor. So we're putting a new service line in, like a new sewer in. It's going to disconnect service lines from different properties, disconnect them from the existing combined sewer, going to connect to a new wastewater sewer, and then the old combined sewer becomes a stormwater sewer, mostly. Yeah, so this is I think Ms. Weeb is here to answer any questions about it. Obviously, we've been picking away at our combined sewer overflow program, and you know, every now and then we have a big contract award for construction. There is, if you're looking at this report, these bids did come in higher than our class 1. It's important to note we're still on budget. Okay, so the program has a budget program, like an annual forecasted fund. It's set up to handle a lot of projects over many years. So the authorized amount needs to be big enough to handle variations in price like this, but we don't want it to be too big, so it ties up money. So it ties up money in a given year. But so this was high. It was about 11% over our class 1 estimate. But like I said, we're still on track. We're still on budget at 34 million. Very excited to get this started.
Well, this includes the rain garden cons, the green.
Yeah, it includes 2 green infrastructure installations as well. We've got bioretention facility and soil storage and rain gardens. So very excited to get that going.
Right on. Excited to.
So moved.
So moved. All those in favor? Aye. Nobody's opposed. That is carried. Report 6.
Report 6 is the recycling and community recycling options for community events. This was from last summer. So last summer, council asked us to look into what we could do to increase recycling at events, any event on city property. So first off, so there's 4 major types of city property that we can book for a community event. Obviously, community centers, but also city-run rec facilities like pools or gymnasiums, public spaces like streets and parking lots. You can book them for a community event, and of course, parks. So those 4 kind of categories are what we were looking at. And it turns out, you can likely imagine there are challenges with doing this at each one of these things. Many community centers, for example, are owned by the city, but they're not run by us. So there's 63 community centers that are run by, different organizations. The rec centers, they're run by municipal combinations, so they're run by city. But they're not really staffed, and like they don't have the staff resources to monitor events. Usually the events are booked, like wedding social or whatever it is. And it's not using city staff there, running the recycling collection. So parks and streets run by Public Works, obviously, kind of the same situation in terms of attending events or servicing events. So there are some things we can do with the existing budget right away. Like we can increase education and signage for recycling and events. We can enhance the availability of bins. We get more bins. We can add it as a requirement to some of the booking permits. Like administratively, we can kind of force recycling there. One of the things this report, pretty much the only thing this report recommends, is that we get council approval to include event recycling at city-owned properties included in our universal services definition. What that means is
Universal services to communities.
so under our waste utility, so our waste utility, our council approved waste utility approach categorizes what kind of things we can fund out of our waste diversion fee, our waste management fee. One of the categories we can fund is something called universal services. That's stuff that does. I think we define it here for a reminder in the report. Universal services is like running the 4R depots, running the community recycling depots, dead animal collection, bulky waste sweeps. It's a bunch of catch-all things that isn't curbside collection. Landfill closure stuff, neighborhood cleanup, tipping fees, that sort of thing comes out of a category in our budget called universal services. So this report is saying, hey, let's add support for recycling at city-owned events in that category, so then we can actually fund the advertising, the education, and supply bins and that sort of thing, and that'll help these other city departments, with the resourcing. One thing you may ask, well, if we're going to add this to something we're going to fund, what's the dollar value impact? Does this change the waste management fee? This sort of thing. Right now, we're not really sure. We kind of want to start doing these changes in the permitting and try to do the education, spread it out there, and see what kind of uptake we get, and then reflect that in like a 2027 budget. If we can't absorb it into our budget lines for universal services already, we would have to come back in a future operating budget and adjust it. But given the timing of this report, where we are in 2026, we don't expect it to have. We don't expect to be able to have problems funding it for 2027, depending on how. Like if it is all of a sudden we've misjudged this and recycling becomes this very expensive thing, then we would come back for budget adjustment as needed to council. But right now, we're saying let's classify it. Let's try to support these other city departments and see what kind of workload it will create. That's basically that. Mike is here to speak to it as well. I think that's pretty much the major parts of the report.
So one question, so that would be a motion to have that under universal services. So, in communicating with community services who oversee community centers, they know whether or not they can put in, like, almost all the community centers are run by boards from the community, except for a few which are operated by GCWCC. Was there any mention that they have agreements and operations that they could add something in regards to? I think most community centers are already doing it, but this originally came forth from a group who was looking at this big, massive event that happened in the Maples, at the Maples Community Center. And the community centers don't necessarily have the resources either. But like when you like, isn't solid waste collection from the community centers, is that not part of those universal services?
They receive, community centers receive free, collection today on both garbage and recycling.
Yeah,
It was a street festival, actually, Counselor, that I think, initiated the,
well, I was talking, anyway, the people pushing it forward wanted something in place before this event happened at the Naples Community Center. And they have a big field there and stuff, so there was a big event happening there as well. Anyway.
the challenge is when you're looking to get increased collection, or containers to collect the materials, put on site, brought there, taken away and collected. Those are the types of challenges that currently exist prior to this report. So this is just a way that we identified working with the other departments there that we could facilitate making this happen. And CBCRA would be a part of that as well. Just in providing some of those receptacles, as well as always looking, they are always looking too for our other ways to help fund some of these things.
One question, for these type of events, would that be a charge? If they're booking an event out on a park or something, they anticipate having a lot of recycling needed to be picked up. Is this something that you would charge as part of the permit to have the event?
It could be put into the permit as a requirement, which is what we've indicated, to change some of our
Yeah,
contracts to say that we're doing it. But if you put this under universal services, it will be included underneath that, where we would do.
I'm just saying that that should be considered. If we expect to be able to pick it up, we have to have the staffing. We've got to know that, if they're having a bunch of events at different parks, is our staff capable of picking it up?
In most of the cases, no, it's not. So this is just, again, just identified that in this report, that that's some of the challenges that exist today.
All right.
But just a bit of a follow through on that, go late. So at Kildonan Park, you have to pull a permit to utilize the, have some built environment kind of things that are open air but have roof over it or whatever. Part of their permit though is they have to take care of the garbage themselves, I think. If that's, I think that's part of it. Is it not?
If it's like, again, this is just having, so any type of permit applications or rental agreements for community halls, the recommendation was that they look at adding that into those documents to encourage recycling at each of the events.
But not parks?
Well, if there's a permit requirement or you're adding it would be encouraged that recycling be.
Well, you have to book it and pay the fee. Okay.
Like, it's really boils down to, these would be all evaluated on a per
Event, yeah.
yeah, per event. So you're gonna have to look at the size of the event, the scope of the event, what they're gonna be, what they're gonna need, what they're gonna require. So
Any other questions?
No.
Who would be would it be would it be 311, or what would be the contact that one would hook an event up with this?
it would depend on the where it is, so as to who they would be dealing with. It's usually community services, I think, would be the bulk of them. And then it would be brought to, when that application's submitted or that request is made, then that would spearhead the whole review and as what we need and what's required to help facilitate it.
We're trying to insert ourselves into it so that when whatever the regular process is for booking an event, that now there's an extra water and waste requirement to promote recycling and or engage us to come help place. It's not we wouldn't want to have this, like, it's not a separate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got it. That's in the
Yeah.
report. Okay.
I think
Yeah.
It would get initiated when they make their initial applications, but the discussions will start.
Well, it sounds everything. So moved.
The recommendations of public service, all those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed, that is carried. On to the addendum report 7.
Yeah, this is a motion from council for the establishing the policies for protection of waterways.
Yeah, if right now it's asking for jurisdictional scan, an analysis of best practices. I can point to the green space, very robust, engagement that took place over the last few years. That really does have, some, best practices, tools and more identified in all of those reports. This is probably asking to kind of disaggregate what may have been presented globally already to individual cities on riparian protection, ecological reserves, public access, habitat conservation, and riverbank management. I want to acknowledge that in many cases, what was put into the biodiversity plan is more robust than this list. But I also appreciate that, you know, the information's there and in many cases, council and the public can read it in sort of a more global form that clearly identifies the Canadian policy tools, but not necessarily individual to the city. We may have gotten them from the global documents. Similar to, we had a good discussion on the feasibility of establishing a minimum 90-foot to 27-meter ecological setback from waterways. Currently, if you just look at what we have in the bylaw, I would argue for regulated areas around waterways, I would argue it's more robust than what is written here. But that will likely come back then to us saying that. That one gives me pause a bit because it says, look at the feasibility of establishing a minimum 90-foot. When current policy exceeds that by 100%, it is a bit uncomfortable to direct something. But because it's looking at a feasibility one, and this would be maybe an interpretive question for the public service, does one then, expect the public service to come back to committee and say as much? That would be a question. And then the environment, financial, legal, planning implications associated with implementing enhanced waterway setback requirements. I would argue number 2 isn't enhanced, given some of the policy we have written, and that it exceeds those feet and meters. But again, the question for the public service is, could we expect you to say that if we move it as is?
I think, to be fair, I'm not sure if this is really the water and waste lead item. I know that, I know we have riverbanks now, riverbank stability folks, but just as a cursory look at this, there are some, like item 1C about public access and jurisdictional scans. Sounds like, Public Works is already doing a look at that as, part of the overall strategy. So, I mean, there are some, I think to your point, there are some overlap. But in terms of the ecological setback, I'm not sure if,
Logic 90 meter thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I could comment offhand right now, but what you're saying makes sense.
I'm assuming it's here because clerks, thinks the applicable policy is here, like the waterway bylaw. Is that what you mean? If I follow you? Is that what you mean?
not under the waterways bylaw, that wouldn't be a good place for something like this.
That's the place that I'm saying is that exceeds the 90 meters here on a setback on development. So that, I mean, like that is what, yeah, that's the bylaw I lean on when I'm saying we already have something that is more robust than 90.
Review and say we already have that though.
Like, I understand why it's at this committee, like
Yeah.
leading the environment, it's the environment committee. And there's an environmental, concern here, framing of it. I think we should have had, some other department representation. To speak to
Parks would be.
Probably.
Why don't we circulate it to them then as part of the motion? I mean, we can pass it with circulation, is that? I was wondering what to do with it too, because the setback piece, I guess I had as chair of property and development, as chair of community services, like this is a well-known essentially a bit of a lobby, if you will. So I feel like we've caught the ball in various ways here. We can circulate the motion for feedback. I think I have gotten the feedback before, not at this committee, obviously. But at probably P&D, that we exceed that in many cases, the bylaw actually demands that we approach it in a over, 300 meter on average way. So I didn't quite, that's the part of the motion that I'm uncomfortable with, because it's less than what we scope in when we're looking at something adjacent to a creek, not a river, right? So, but it is, and then the word feasibility, I don't understand in that way, right? Of course, it's feasible, but it's not as directed. So I don't really understand number 2. But I know that we could consider the ecological setback work that we've got in policy, and within the and it would be various policies, I guess, to your point, because it's not just the one that I mentioned. That just happens to be the one with the biggest sort of, that's the one that I think of when I think of how we exceed 90 feet or 27 meters, right? When we look at it in policy. So, so I don't know about number 2, but number 1 and number 3 sort of jumps off number 2 in terms of financial, legal, planning implications associated with implementing enhanced waterway setbacks. So I think number 3 does the trick without establishing a minimum that is actually narrower than what we have established in policy. So, but number 3 moves on to say, what are the implications in various policies on implementing enhanced setback requirements, which I think is what the folks are going for. They're wanting enhanced setbacks, if not even preservation without considering development. And certainly we did that in the parks. You'll recall, Councillor Eady, when we had to go back because we locked down sort of this anti-development ethos in parks to the point where you couldn't get a storage shed on it. And that was our bad, my bad last term. And so we had to correct that. And so my concern with number 2 is that it it is actually narrower than what we have in many policies. But number 3 actually moves to what I think their intent is, which is enhancing a setback and specific to an ecological setback, which is different than just a development setback, right? Development from riverbank. And so I don't know whether to change the motion and say, examine setting minimum thresholds for ecological setbacks, or just leaving it to number 3, which is like essentially incorporating 2 and 3, and then leaving it, because the spirit of 3 is to consider the implications associated with enhanced. If you put enhanced waterway and ecological setback requirements, I think that it would cover number 2. Without getting into some of the issues that I have, which I can't figure out where the 90 foot comes from when we've got better ones in some cases. So I don't know. I don't want to destroy a colleague's motion. It was directed here from council, I believe, or does it go
Came
up
from
to
council.
council? Yeah. Yeah, but at the same time, we're responsible for letting council know where policy's at, and I believe policy exceeds this minimum here in a way that, you know, I wouldn't be able to support the minimum, but I could support an enhanced number 3, which is enhanced ecological setback and waterway setback, if you guys are okay with that.
If I could make comments.
Does that mean you can't run an AT path down? We had a presenter come and talk about the decommissioning of a piece of railway that is intended to have an active transportation trail, like.
This is essentially a report on best practices in Canadian municipalities
Yeah,
and
yeah.
in waterway and ecological setback. And so the rest, you know, doesn't mean anything right now, but it means
Well,
getting
if
something
I-
in order.
If I could comment, I'm looking at number 1, it's a cross jurisdictional analysis, and that could be that they have some sort of minimum setback. Number 2 is just a feasibility, it's not written in stone. You're gonna look at it and you're gonna determine if 90 feet is feasible, or if 80 feet is feasible, or 100 feet, whichever, and you're gonna base that on, based on the other municipalities that you're gonna compare it with. So number 2 doesn't not hurt having it in there.
I don't know, number 2 doesn't flow from number 1 though. Number 2 is separate and apart. You're considering that it floats. I don't read it that way.
Yeah.
You're considering that it flows from number 1, but if it did, it would be 1A,
What I'm-
1B.
What I'm looking at is I'm looking at a river, and if I could see some bush along the river, whether it be 90 feet or otherwise, that would be consistent with me. That would be a good ecological setback from the waterway. Versus having someone's lawn go all the way to the river.
Colleagues, can I just point something out? We just voted on a motion that involved having to work with other departments to come up with something, right? Or to speak to it, and Councilor Rowlands, you accurately pointed out that a lot of work in this regard has been done. And not sure the full extent of the biodiversity report there, but I mean, they did a lot of consulting. I think they probably talked to other jurisdictions. I'm not sure, but it just seems to me, while it is related to the environment of our waterways, I think, you know, as the environment thing, there's leader, but I don't see any problem with just moving this, and then they can discuss whatever departments are related to that. To get advice, what do you think? So
Yeah, I mean,
the report doesn't say thou must do 90 feet or whatever, right?
yeah, it just, I don't know, just, you're right. I think I'm just, I'm just talking out loud about how, how we, how we think about setbacks now, and that it is more robust than maybe. And so similar to when, Councillor Mays asked me to set a minimum threshold for community kitchens within our funding. And he said, let's do it at 20. And it came back that we were doing 48% of grant funding to community kitchens. And I said, if I had have done it at 20, the public service would have said, okay, well, we've hit that target potentially. So, we're exceeding. And so you don't want to set something minimum when, direction in place when you have, 200 times that. But yeah, I don't know, we can see what comes back. It's just a report.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
I
if.
just wanted
I'm
some
prepared to move.
clarification. Yeah, I just wanted some clarification though too.
Yeah,
Under which one of these recommendations would we be dealing with? Like, what are other cities doing in regards to riverbank stabilization and how do they fund it? Because we don't do enough in the city. It's a sad thing that we're not stabilizing our riverbanks so that they can be resilient to huge amounts of water and so on.
It's a fair point. I know that the riverbank stabilization budget is its own line item.
Yeah, it's not that much.
Yeah, the assessment of like geotechnical stability and riverbank assessment and inside the floodplain there, that was moved from property and planning to waterways last year or year before. Yeah, and I should clarify like this, there's, we'll collaborate with other departments to produce this report. This is, we're the public service, we're a big team, we can handle it. But yeah, the other jurisdictional, like if the motion's asking for like a jurisdictional scan on all those activities, that could be part, whether that's covered, whether we're already doing jurisdictional scans as part of other work, that's fine. I mean, this can be a standard report too. It's not a big deal. It's asking for 180 days. There's lots of time there. We can sort it out. Get it back.
Oh, we're good with that? Councilors?
yeah, if we can point to the biodiversity, because I think it's kind of difficult for the public service to see all of that work that went in and all of the Canadian studies that, exceeded, and then have council, do a motion that, doesn't mean that no one read it on council. It just means that, we're excited about this aspect of moving, an ecological and waterway protection, instituting more protections for waterways. And so if we could add the biodiversity work somehow to the motion, that would be great. And then I'm prepared to move.
Yeah, so you're adding. Okay,
Sorry, so there is an amendment to the motion?
Just an acknowledgement of the biodiversity work that, might lend itself to answering the motion. And then we can move. I think I put those words on the record. I don't think it needs to be added to the motion. But I'm prepared to move. The public service, like the council recommendation.
excellent. All right, so we have the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed. That is carried. You had a new business item, Councillor Rose?
Yes.
Or Councillor Dobson?
Yes. My item was the wetland trunk. Currently we have construction on Ness Avenue with some caissons sitting and blocking 2 lanes. And the public in St. James has no idea why they're there. So, or for how long.
So I can speak to that. We're doing some work to bypass, or we need to bypass the flows in the Nest sewer. So as we move our tunneling machine through, the Nest sewer is low, so we need to move it so we can get the tunnel through. Notifications did start going out yesterday and they're continuing today. So it could, yeah, I guess the caissons maybe got delivered a bit before all the notifications were out, but it is our intent to notify people. And construction should be starting very shortly. The length, the duration depends a bit on how long it takes for the tunneling machine to reach that intersection. But we expect it'll probably be a couple weeks.
My other question is, when you said you're sending out notifications to who?
So Rutland to Nest was notified yesterday, and I guess today they're doing like Nest to Silver. They're
Okay, on Rutland.
Yeah.
Okay, so someone further down the road, either direction, has no clue why we've got our whole street all dug up.
Yeah, I guess construction notices do go on our website, but yeah, where the notification went to the people in the imminent vicinity, that's.
Yeah, okay. And
hopefully the counselor's office was notified, and if that was.
well, I knew what it was.
Okay, I was gonna say, if that was somehow missed, my apologies for that.
We are notified.
Okay, great.
We get the notification.
Any other tunnels or any other caissons gonna be there? Is there gonna be one on Rutland at Portage?
I don't believe so, but if I can take that and can confirm with project staff and get back to you, that would be.
And when I say that, I meant Rutland back lane
Right,
north of Portage,
okay.
because that's where this sewer line would be.
I will confirm that one for you, Counselor.
And none on Bruce.
I'm aware of this one. I don't want to sign my name in blood
At
for
this
anything
moment, I
else
think
without
it's on
speaking
Bruce.
to.
Okay, because I don't see anything there yet.
Yeah,
Just want the heads up, that's all.
for sure.
And is it possible for the next meeting, you give us a verbal on how the project's proceeding?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I could do it right now. It's going to be at committee as well. It's like
Monday, yeah.
I mean,
FSR on Monday.
FSR on Monday, yeah, but
It's BC fund.
I could give you a spoiler alert and tell you that the tunneling is, we've got 700 meters of tunneling done on this drive. So we're halfway through this like main drive and like over 2/3 the way through the project. So
Which is great.
it's going great. Yeah, we've hit a few, not great soil conditions, but by and large, the progress that the crew is making is great.
That's nice to hear.
Yeah.
I just have a question. I've said this to our director, but it's interesting. We get these notices, waterways projects, and in the letters, if people have questions, they're called 311. But when we have street renewals, Public Works puts out a notice, and what they have there is they have contracted or whatever to the resident's phone. So it's a direct phone number to somebody sort of assisting and informing the neighborhood. It's a lot faster than going through 311. Has Water and Waste looked at that, even like with the Rutland project? Is there, that's a 311 notice that goes out if they have questions?
Yeah, right now it's a 311. I know that in the past, we are reviewing that, take it back to review, we're doing this. There's been various changes over time. Sometimes we've given out the direct project manager phone number, cell phones, or sometimes it's been desk phones and this sort of thing. It for the last little while, it's been 301 to try to centralize and track and triage. There's pros and cons, but to your point of being more direct and responsive, we're taking that back to review and see if we should be doing that.
Okay. Good. That's good. Are you going Are you gonna move the
Yeah.
verbal report as information?
Yes. What is it?
This is no longer a report back then? This is-
I would like them to report back at the next meeting anyway, just to give us an update at that point.
Verbal?
Verbal's fine.
Yeah.
30, so, verbal report back in 30 days with an update on the Rutland Trunk Sewer Project.
So I don't have to ask you. By then, they might be finished this, how fast this will be. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Nobody's opposed, that's carried. Motion to adjourn. Council
Yes.
Rhodes, thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Nobody's opposed, that is carried.
Everyone? We off, Nick? We're good? Okay. Done?
Just